I've been a nurse for over a decade, but night shifts still get to me. 2 nights ago, my shift started like any other. The hospital was clean and quiet, just how I liked it. But I was tired from work and caring for my mother at home. I moved from room to room, checking on patients, trying to shake off the exhaustion that pressed down on me. I've never stopped thinking about what happened next. On my 3rd night, I was walking down the hallway when I noticed something strange. An empty wheelchair was moving slowly toward me. I stood frozen, my heart racing. Maybe it was a draft, or maybe my tired eyes were playing tricks. The chair rolled until it bumped into a wall and stopped. I approached it cautiously. Nothing seemed out of place, but I felt like it was watching me. That feeling made my skin crawl. Later that night, I heard whispering down the corridor. It was faint, but I could swear I heard my name. I rounded the corner and found nobody there. My heart pounded in the silence. I'm not sure why I stood there for so long. The hospital felt alive when it should have been asleep. As the nights passed, odd things kept happening. I found doors to patient rooms locked when they shouldn't be. Patients said they saw someone standing at their bedside. But there was no one else on the floor. I worried I was losing it. Maybe the hospital held secrets I wasn't meant to uncover. One night, I walked by room 215. I had just come from checking on a different patient. Suddenly, a loud bang came from inside. I pushed the door, but it wouldn't budge. I looked through the small window. Nothing seemed off. Just an empty bed. I knocked. No answer. My gut twisted. Something wasn't right. I backed away slowly, feeling uneasy. A few moments later, I glanced over at Mrs. Reynolds. She was sitting up wide-eyed, staring toward room 215. He said he'd come back, she whispered, trembling. I frowned and asked who she meant. She shook her head slowly, like it was too much to explain. My stomach dropped. I didn't know if she was hallucinating or if she knew something I didn't. The lights flickered above. A cold draft swept through the hallway. I heard it again, a whisper saying my name. The air felt heavy. I turned around and saw a shadow at the end of the hall, staring back at me. I was terrified. What was it? Why was this happening? In that moment, I felt like the air was being crushed out of my lungs. Then the figure disappeared into the darkness. I stood frozen, stunned, with fear creeping up my spine. Finally, it whispered one last time, "You shouldn't be here." The words echoed in my mind long after I returned to my duties, and I couldn't shake the feeling that my night shifts were only just beginning. I walked into my next shift feeling uneasy. I didn't want to acknowledge the strange occurrences, but they hung over me like a dark cloud. Those whispers and shadowy figures replayed in my mind. I thought about talking to someone, but I knew how that would go. It's just your imagination. You're tired. So, I put my head down and tried to focus on my work. As I made my rounds, I checked on my patients. Mrs. Reynolds remained unchanged, still fixated on room 215. She kept mumbling about that someone. I decided it was best to distract her. I brought her some water and chatted about the day's events, but her eyes seemed lost in another world. It worried me. That night, the atmosphere thickened like fog. I swept through a few rooms without incident. But then I heard it again, the whispered calling of my name. I froze, scanning the dark hallways. It echoed in a way that made me question my sanity. I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was just exhausted. Then something changed. The lights flickered again, but this time, they didn't just flicker. They went out completely. I fumbled for my flashlight, the darkness swallowing me whole. A sense of panic rose within me as I heard movement, distant footsteps clicking against the floor tiles. "Hello." My voice shook as it bounced off the walls. No answer, just an oppressive silence wrapping around me. I turned on my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness. I hesitated, feeling as if I was being watched from the shadows. As I started to move, I noticed the door to room 215 was slightly ajar. I didn't want to, but my curiosity pulled me closer. A feeling of dread settled in my stomach, but I pushed it aside. I needed answers. The whispers had to mean something that I gently pushed the door open. The sight froze me in place. The room was empty, as I'd expected. But on the bedside table, there was a small object that didn't belong. I stepped in, my heart pounding. It was a teddy bear, one I knew was left behind by a little girl who'd been discharged weeks ago. I reached out, but before I could touch it, I heard a low, guttural voice from behind me, breathy and raspy. "You shouldn't have come here." I spun around, flashlight shaking in my hand. The beam landed on a figure that made my blood run cold. It was a dark silhouette, standing just beyond the threshold that I stumbled backward, the bear slipping from my fingers. "Who are you?" I gasped, but the figure only stared. My mind raced, trying to connect the dots. The voice, the shadow, the bear. Everything was spiraling out of control, then, as if sensing my fear, the figure took a step forward, and everything went dark again. I felt a rush of cold air as silence enveloped me, the whispers rushing back, louder and more frantic. "You shouldn't be here," they chorused as I gripped the doorframe, the world swirling around me. Whatever was happening, I had to find out what it wanted. But in that moment, I understood I was about to uncover something bigger than I ever imagined. Something dangerous. I blinked, the darkness fading slowly as my flashlight flickered back to life. The figure was gone, but the chill in the air remained. I stepped back into the night, the hallway illuminated just enough for me to see the remnants of my panic. The bear lay on the floor, staring up at me with its button eyes as if it were still waiting for its owner. I picked it up cautiously, keeping my eyes on the door to room 215. The whispers continued, drifting through my mind, tugging at something deep inside me. "You shouldn't be here." Who were they? Were they the spirits of those who once roamed these halls? Or was it just my tired mind playing tricks? I put the bear back on the bedside table. I needed to get out of that room. As I stepped into the hallway, I took a deep breath. This was not just about me anymore. Whatever had happened to that little girl, it was clearly tied to this place. I turned the flashlight toward the nurse's station, hoping to get backup or at least someone to share my concerns with, but as I reached the station, I felt an immediate sense of dread. The lights flickered overhead again, this time dimming ominously. I could see the papers scattered across the desk, but there was no one there. No nurses, no other staff. I shivered, realizing I was alone in this sprawling, haunted building. Then I heard it again. The faint footsteps echoed down the hallway, but they were softer now, more deliberate. I couldn't tell if they were getting closer or moving further away. I felt drawn toward the sound, my instincts clashing. Part of me screamed to run, while another part insisted I follow, that maybe it would lead me to some kind of explanation. Taking one shaky step forward, I allowed the sound to guide me. It led me back toward room 215, a place my gut told me I should avoid. But the whispers were relentless now, pulling me in. I drew closer, noticing that the door had swung wide open on its own, an invitation I felt ill-prepared to accept. Before I could process my next move, a figure stepped around the corner of the hallway. I gasped, my heart dropping. It was a child, no more than 7 or 8. She wore a hospital gown, small hands clasped in front of her. Her appearance was hauntingly familiar, tousled hair and a faded smile that sent chills down my spine. "Can you help me?" she whispered, her voice soft but edged with a strange intensity. "I want to go home." I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. I felt a pull toward her, the urge to help her overwhelming. But those whispers returned, louder now, rising in a clamor as if warning me. I understood too late that this was just another layer of the mystery, a piece of a puzzle that might lead me deeper into trouble. My instincts kicked in. "Where is home?" I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. But the girl didn't answer. Instead, she looked at me with wide, pleading eyes before she turned and dashed down the hallway. Before I could make sense of it, I chased after her, my mind racing with questions. Who was she? What happened to her? And what would I find if I caught up? The lengthening shadows cast by my flashlight danced along the walls as I ran, urgency driving me forward. Maybe she was a clue to all of this, the key to breaking the cycle of fear that gripped this hospital. But then, in the distance, I heard the low, guttural voice again. You shouldn't have followed her. My breath hitched in my throat. I screeched to a halt, the flashlight beam shaking wildly as fear flooded my senses. Whatever was waiting for me was right ahead, and I realized I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I stood frozen, the weight of dread pressing down on me. My flashlight flickered as I searched the hallway, scanning for anything that might offer a hint of safety. The voice echoed again, wrapping around me like a cold blanket. You shouldn't have followed her. Just then, the girl's small form darted around the corner, but I could barely focus on her figure. My heart hammered in my chest, caught between the urge to run and the instinct to protect. I made a split-second decision, follow the child that I took off toward her, my feet pounding against the floor, desperate to keep up. Wait! I shouted, startling myself with the urgency in my voice. The hallway stretched before me, a seemingly endless corridor filled with shadows and the faint hum of electricity. She glanced back, her eyes wide with something that looked like fear, and then she vanished into another room. I hurried after her, skidding to a stop as I entered what looked like an old playroom, once bright and cheerful. Now, everything was coated in dust and decay. Toys lay scattered, their paint chipped, and the air hung thick with the scent of neglect. Where are you? I called, my voice trembling. My flashlight picked up broken dolls and a small tricycle, all remnants of a childhood lost. But there was no sign of the girl. Panic rose in my throat. Had I lost her? Then I heard the soft sound of weeping. My heart sank as I turned, the noise leading me deeper into the room. It led me to a small corner where an old rocking chair creaked back and forth, swaying without any visible force. I stepped closer. Is someone there? My voice wavered. The crying grew louder. I knew I shouldn't be there, but curiosity pulled me in like a moth to flame. I reached out for the chair, and as my fingers grazed the worn fabric, the weeping stopped, silence enveloped me, thick and suffocating. I spun around, scanning for movement, but all I found was the pile of toys, now ominously still. It felt as if the room had altered, the air growing colder around me. I took a step back, heart racing, and that's when I saw a small object gleaming beneath the chair. I knelt down and picked it up, squinting into the dim light. It was a locket, old and tarnished, shaped like a heart. As I opened it, a rush of cold air surged around me. Inside were two tiny pictures, one was of the little girl, the other was of a woman who looked vaguely familiar. Who are you? I whispered, feeling the weight of the discovery. Just then, the lights overhead flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness for a split second. Fear clawed at my gut. In that fleeting blackout, I sensed movement behind me. When the lights returned, I turned swiftly. The girl stood at the door, eyes wide and tear-streaked. You have to go. She cried, her voice urgent and strained. They know you're here. Before I could reply, she turned and bolted down the hallway, leaving me in stunned silence. I looked back at the locket in my hand, questions swirling in my mind. I had come looking for answers, but now I felt the creeping dread of a warning. Did I really want to know what awaited me next? Taking a steadying breath, I followed her footsteps into the night. I raced down the hallway, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the quiet. The girl's warning played in my head like a haunting melody. They know you're here. Who were they? I pushed off the walls as I turned corner after corner, my breath quickening. The atmosphere thickened, anxiety slithering through me. But all I could think about was the girl. I had to find her. Wait. I called again, my voice hoarse in the stillness. Ahead, I spotted a door with peeling paint, slightly ajar. The faint light from within flickered as if inviting me in. I stepped forward, hesitant. Was this where she went? I pushed the door open, heart racing, and stepped inside a small room. A solitary bed stood in the center, the sheets wrinkled and untouched. In stark contrast to the decay surrounding it, a soft glow illuminated the space, casting eerie shadows. I moved cautiously, feeling like I was intruding on something I didn't understand. In one corner, sat a dusty old music box. It looked exquisite despite its age, carved with intricate designs. I approached, drawn to it, but the room seemed to shift around me. I could hear whispers, indistinct yet persistent, weaving together. I leaned closer to the music box and lifted the lid. The melodic chimes played a sweet, sorrowful tune that echoed off the walls. Goosebumps pricked my skin. Suddenly, the whispers stopped, leaving an oppressive silence. My eyes darted around the room. "Is anyone here?" I asked, feeling stupid for speaking into the void. No response. Then, it happened. The music box crashed shut by itself, the sound cutting through the stillness. My heart lurched. I stumbled back and hit the wall, panic setting in. This quiet room was no longer a sanctuary. It felt alive. I turned, desperate to escape, but the hallway I had come from now felt like a distant memory. I looked back at the music box, and realization washed over me. It was like a beckoning hand, urging me to stay as the shadows flickered and danced. "I just wanted to help," I murmured, not knowing who I was talking to. Was the girl still nearby? Or had she vanished into the building like all the other remnants of a time long past? As the shadows deepened, I felt an unmistakable presence behind me. The air shifted, becoming charged and heavy. "You shouldn't have come here," a voice whispered, echoing the one I'd heard earlier. I turned sharply, dread pooling in my stomach. There she was, a flicker of light in the corners of my vision, standing in the doorway, eyes wide, expression twisted with fear. "Run!" she screamed, her voice urgent. "Now!" Without thinking, I darted past her into the hallway, adrenaline fueling my flight. I couldn't look back, not now. I could feel the urgency of her warning thrumming in the air. I didn't understand what was happening, but all that mattered was escape. I raced through the halls, the structure surging with unseen life around me. Doors slammed shut as I ran by, each thud reverberating in my chest. I needed to find a way out, but a low hum filled the air now, a sound that felt almost alive. Suddenly, I stumbled, and the locket slipped from my grasp, hitting the floor with a soft clink. I reached down to grab it, but then everything went dark. The flickering lights died completely, leaving me in pitch silence. My heart pounded as my hands groped for the wall, searching for stability. "What's happening?" I whispered into the void. Then, just as abruptly, the lights flickered back on, and I gasped as I found myself not in the hallway, but in a completely different room, one I didn't recognize. My breathing quickened, panic clawing at my throat. I felt a coldness wrap around me, whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. And that's when I realized, I was no longer alone. The room was small and cluttered, filled with old medical equipment that looked like it had been abandoned for decades. Faded charts hung on the walls, their details faded and unreadable. A faint smell of antiseptic lingered in the air, mixing with something rotten. I took a step back, my breath hitching in my throat. "Who are you?" I asked, hoping the darkness would give me answers. The shadows shifted, and I felt the chill of dread creep over me. "I'm here," the girl's voice said softly, cutting through the silence. She emerged from the shadows, her figure illuminated by the flickering overhead light. Her eyes were wide and filled with fear, and I could see her reflection more like a ghost than a girl. "You shouldn't have followed me." "Why? What is going on?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady despite the panic clawing at my insides. "They can feel you now," she said, glancing nervously at the door. They know you're here. Who are they? I pressed. The urgency in her tone scared me more than I cared to admit. She opened her mouth to respond, but then a loud crash echoed from the hallway, followed by chaotic shuffling noises. My heart sank as I realized I was out of time. We need to get out of here. It's too late, she whispered, her eyes darting to the door. They won't let you leave. My mind raced. I couldn't stand by and let whatever was out there capture me. I turned to the window, the only light shining through the grimy glass revealing an alley below. We can escape through here. The girl shook her head, fear etched across her face. You don't understand. It's not safe. Before she could finish, there was another crash, closer this time, and I felt the floor tremble beneath me. I don't care. I shouted, urgency building within me. I can't die here. I ran to the window and pushed it open. Cool air rushed in, contrasting sharply with the heat of panic. I climbed onto the ledge, surveying the drop. It looked far, too far. Come on. I turned back to the girl, but she hadn't moved. Please, I begged, you have to come with me. Her lips parted as if to protest, but a ghastly wail split the air. The noise echoed down the hallway, rising and falling like a wild storm. She shivered, fear shifting her features. They're coming, she cried, the urgency swelled inside me. I didn't care what was waiting for us in the alley, anything had to be better than this. As I reached for her arm, she recoiled, shaking her head fiercely. You don't know what you're doing. But I was already too far gone. I jumped from the ledge, my feet landing awkwardly on the pavement below. Pain shot up my legs, but I forced myself to stand. Come on. I yelled again, but all I could see was her silhouette framed in the window. She was still there, frozen in place. I can't, she whispered. Her voice barely reached me over the chaos inside the building. I turned to look up at her, my heart pounding. Then everything shifted. The shadows twisted and swirled, and suddenly, the door burst open. A figure emerged, cloaked in darkness, moving with a speed that felt unnatural. My breath caught in my throat as I realized something terrifying. I was now entirely alone. I didn't have time to think. My legs screamed in protest, but I forced myself to run toward the alley's exit. Every instinct told me to keep moving, but a nagging feeling pricked at me. What had I just jumped into? The alley was narrow, flanked by tall, crumbling brick walls. Dim light from a distant street lamp penetrated the darkness, but it did little to quell my rising panic. I barely registered the rusty dumpster and stacks of debris as I sprinted, my mind racing through 1,000 what-ifs. Then, I heard the sound of hurried footsteps behind me, echoing in the stillness of the night. My pulse quickened. I didn't dare look back. I couldn't. I turned a corner, hoping to lose whatever was chasing me. The street was deserted, and shadows danced under the flickering lights. My breath came in ragged gasps as I pushed myself harder. I could feel the eyes of the girl, the ghostly one, haunting me. Why hadn't she jumped? Where was she now? I needed answers. I needed to know what was happening. Suddenly, a soft thud broke through my thoughts, followed by a whisper, "Help." The sound seemed to originate from a doorway slightly ajar to my left. A figure was inside, silhouetted against the pale light spilling from within. I hesitated. Something instinctively told me not to trust it, but my desperate need for safety overrode my caution. "Are you okay?" I called out, inching closer. To my surprise, it was a boy, torn clothes and dirt smudged across his face. His eyes wide with fear matched the uncertainty I felt. "They're coming," he uttered, his voice trembling. "You need to hide." I turned, scanning the street behind me. Nothing yet. Who? What is going on? Before he could respond, the ground shook slightly, accompanied by a bone-chilling groan. My stomach nodded. The girl from before had spoken of them feeling my presence. Was this the result? Please, just get in, he urged, stepping aside to let me inside the darkened room. I should have listened to my instincts. This felt wrong. But fear overwhelmed logic, and I darted inside, heart pounding. The boy shut the door, the sound echoing in the quiet space. They can smell fear, he whispered. We have to be silent. I nodded, but my mind was racing. This boy knew something. I needed to ask him, to pry at the fear gripping me, to understand this nightmare I was caught in. But as I opened my mouth, the walls thudded. And then everything went dark. The lights flickered and went out, completely engulfing me in shadows. My heart pounded in my chest, and panic began to rise again. What is happening? I shouted, but my voice felt swallowed by the darkness. Stay still, the boy hissed, shaking his head. Don't move. If they find us. I swallowed hard, 1,000 scenarios playing out in my mind. I thought of the girl, and what might have happened if I had been braver. And then the unmistakable sound echoed through the darkness, a low, guttural growl. My body went tense, every muscle clenching as I strained to listen. The growl resonated again, closer this time, sending a chill down my spine. The boy beside me shifted, his breath coming quick and shallow, and I felt his presence like a weight. We were both terrified. Do you think they can see us? I whispered, my voice barely a breath. It's not about sight, he murmured. They sense fear. Just don't show it. Easier said than done. My mind raced with images of what could be lurking in the shadows, what those things were. I replayed the girl's warning, how she spoke as if death was a game she understood well. It made me sick just thinking about it. The growl sounded again, accompanied by heavy footsteps that thudded like a haunting drum. I felt the boy's hand grip my arm, urging me to stay quiet. I pressed my back against the wall, trying to blend into the darkness. But fear had a way of amplifying the sound of my breath, turning it into a thunderous echo in my own ears. Do they come in here? I asked, my voice trembling despite myself. Not usually, he replied, his tone so low it was almost a whisper. But if they catch a whiff of you, it's over. The weight of his words settled heavily between us. I wanted to scream, to break the spell of this suffocating space. I wanted anyone to come save us. Instead, all I could do was brace myself for whatever was about to happen. The footsteps stopped abruptly outside. I held my breath, my heart racing as I counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3. The door creaked as if someone was testing it. My body tensed, ready to bolt, but where could I go? Then, a voice broke the silence. It was low and gravelly, but distinctly human. I know you're in there. There's nowhere to hide. A jolt of fear shot through my entire being. Who was that? I turned to the boy, but he shook his head. Don't respond. Just stay still. I could barely contain the panic swelling inside me. My mind raced through 100 escape plans, none of them good. The growling continued, now mingled with the voice taunting us from the other side. Suddenly, there was a loud bang against the door. The walls shook, sending dust cascading to the ground. The boy squeezed my arm tighter, his grip almost painful. I clenched my jaw, desperate to hold in a whimper. And then the door splintered. A crack formed in the wood, and a sliver of light sliced through the darkness. That single beam illuminated a shadowy figure standing just outside. Let me in, it said, and I saw a glimpse of eyes burning with a feral glow. That's when my instincts kicked in, and I pushed away from the wall, ready to bolt. The boy pulled me back, panic in his eyes. No. Don't. But it was too late. Whatever had come for us would not be denied. The door gave way with a violent crash, flinging the splintered remnants aside. My heart dropped as I felt the air shift. I didn't want to look, but I had to know what was on the other side. The figure stood silhouetted in the light, its shape twisting and contorting unnaturally. I could barely make out features, but those eyes, that predatory gleam, sent terror spiraling through me. "Run!" I shouted, pushing the boy aside. There was no time to hesitate. But before I could take a step, the creature lunged into the room with a growl that threatened to swallow me whole, that I barely dodged its grip. It slammed into the wall where I'd just been, splintering the old wood further. The boy was still frozen in place, eyes wide with fear. "Move!" I screamed, my words breaking through the horror that gripped us. Finally, he snapped to action. We bolted through the door just as the creature regained its stance, snarling at our backs. The hallway stretched dark and endless ahead of us, a stark contrast to the moment we had just escaped. That we dashed around corners, blindly navigating the chaotic labyrinth of the building. My breath came in ragged gasps. I glanced at the boy, and panic lit his eyes. "Where are we going?" he asked, his voice quaking with urgency. "Anywhere but here," I replied, pushing myself to run faster. The growling echoed behind us, growing fainter but far from gone. I didn't know if it would follow us or if there were more lurking just around the next bend. As we rushed down another corridor, I noticed strange signs plastered on the walls, warnings about hazardous materials, a list of emergency contacts that seemed far too long. It felt wrong in here, everything screamed danger. Those reminders didn't help the gnawing fear that gripped my insides. Suddenly, a door swung open ahead of us. A figure, a nurse, I realized, stepped out, her face pale. She looked at us, widening her eyes in shock. "What is going on?" she demanded, but before I could answer, the growl erupted again, shaking the very ground we stood on. "Get inside!" I shouted, grabbing the boy and yanking him forward. We clambered into the room, and I slammed the door shut. The nurse turned to us, her brow furrowed, but there was no time for explanations. "Lock it!" I urged the boy. He fumbled with the latch, hands shaking, and finally managed to secure it. I pressed my back against the door, heart thudding in my chest as I listened. The growling had stopped. It was a fresh wave of dread that washed over me. "Where are we?" the nurse asked, and I could see the rising panic reflected in her eyes. I opened my mouth to speak, but then I caught sight of something on the wall, a list of names in marker, all crossed out, one remaining clear. A chill crept through me as I realized that each name was dated. Some were scratched out several years ago, others just the day before. That S, when I saw it, I thought, my heart sinking. Beneath the last name, a fresh scrawl read, "Next, too." As I absorbed the grim reality, I felt the pounding of something outside the door. Something that seemed to want in. I pressed against the door, the panic settling into my bones, each thud echoing like a countdown. "What the hell is happening?" the nurse asked, her eyes glossed over with fear. The boy and I exchanged a glance, a silent agreement that there was no time for reassurances. "They know we're here," I managed to say, barely above a whisper. "I don't know what they are, but we can't stay." Just then, the door rattled violently, the growl from the corridor intensifying, vibrating through the walls. We scrambled for a nearby window. It was small, barely able to fit one person at a time, but it was our only chance. "Help me!" I shouted, gesturing for the boy to climb up. He needed to go first. As he hoisted himself onto the sill, the door splintered further, and the handle cracked under the pressure of whatever sought to enter. "Just go!" I yelled that as he squeezed through, I felt my own breathing become frantic. I had to get out. But the moment I turned towards the window, the nurse grabbed my arm. "No! You're going to leave me?" she cried, panic surfacing. "There's no time. You have to." Before I could finish, the door burst open, revealing a nightmare spiraling forth. Shadows spilled into the room, twisting as if they carried weight. The boy hesitated on the ledge, eyes wide with horror. "Go!" I screamed again, pushing him towards the alley below. He leaped out just as the dark figure lunged toward us. I turned back to the nurse, fear creeping into my voice. You have to follow. But her attention was locked onto the figure emerging from the shadows. What is it? She gasped, paralyzed by terror as it prowled forward, eyes glowing with an unnatural light. I had only seen the remnants of that presence when I caught a glimpse of its silhouette now. The reality was worse than any imagination could depict. That in one desperate motion, I shoved the nurse down towards the window. Climb! I yelled, fear cracking my voice. The shadow lunged, but I darted back, seeking a new escape route. Help! The boy shouted from the alley below, panic rising as he caught a glimpse of the chaos unfolding. I felt a surge of determination push me forward, grabbing the edge of the windowsill. The nurse finally moved, clambering up behind me. With a surge of adrenaline, I forced myself up. The creature's growls silenced the room yet again, and I knew we didn't have long. I caught the nurse as she slipped through, and then I was out, landing hard beside the boy. Run! I shouted, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I bolted down the alley, not looking back. The air was thick with remnants of dread as we hurried onward, my feet pounding against the pavement. We needed to get away, far away. But questions battered my thoughts. What had we unleashed? What was the connection between the girl and that sinister figure? In the distance, the sirens wailed, bright spots of color flickering against the night sky. But the dread didn't dissipate. I felt it treble in my chest, a lingering presence that held an eerie promise, its whispers unmistakably hollow. I never glanced back, but the shadows seemed to reach for us as we ran. It wasn't just the building's darkness that haunted my steps. It wasn't over. Whatever had been awakened remained untamed, lurking in the corners of every corridor, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to wander where they did not belong. Days later, I returned to the hospital to collect my things, my heart heavy with memories that refused to fade. The walls loomed like some dark dream, but in the light of day, they were just walls, nothing more. The staff never spoke of what happened that night, and the girl, a ghost or a figment of my exhaustion, had vanished like the whispers in the air, leaving behind more questions than answers. I'll never truly know what lurked in those halls, or whether the warnings were a figment of my imagination or something far more sinister. But every night since, as I try to sleep, I can't shake the feeling. The feeling that whatever they were still out there, waiting. I've never stepped foot back in that hospital, and I doubt I ever will.